Hey all my chibis, so I am back and feeling a lot better, so thank you guys for waiting, and today we're going to be doing a team building video, so I hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so let's get into it. So for your team, you want to have a shooter. So in this video, I'll be showing you my shooter, who is Beatrice. But there are a lot of shooters in this game. So for example, we have Shanti, and let's see, there's other ones like Kyoko, and you can tell if the player is a shooter by looking over here, and it says specialized shooter, so striker. And over here you also want to have a goalkeeper. So next I'm going to be talking about the next player that you want to have. So let's work backwards or forwards, I don't know. So you want to start let's start building from the forwards line, and next you want to have a passer. But Narizel is a passer, and you can check because it says assist. This player will have a pass as her active or his active skill, and that's the active skill, and it'll just say pass. And there are different types of passers. There are also long passers, so make sure that you don't get them mixed up and don't put like a long passer in the front line unless you're trying to do something like off meta. But Khaled is an example of a long passer in the back line. So you can see over here that they normally put the character in the back line, and the skill will also say long pass, so that's a really good way to check if they're not like an inline like front forward passer. So next, there are two things that you can also do for your forward line. You can either have another passer, or you can put in a leader or someone that can buff your front line. And it doesn't have to be a leader, it could be a defender. A great example of someone that you can also put in your front line could be Ernesto. So Ernesto has really good buffs, and the reason why you want to have a buffer in your front line is because you want your shooter to do as much damage as possible. So a really good frontline setup would just be a shooter, a passer, and a buffer. But also you could run Evelyn in the front line. She's also an inline front passer, not to be confused with a forward pass. A forward passer could be Lin Mei, for example, and you can check that over here as well. It says forward pass. So there's three kinds of passes: pass, forward pass, and long pass, so don't get them mixed up. As you can see, Evelyn has a really good buff for the front line, and it increases the critical rate and critical damage as well as reflex. So this is really important because you want your front line to, like I said before, do as much damage as possible. And coupled with Ernesto's passives, such as increasing critical damage, reflex, receiving pass effect, critical rate, and action speed, you're doing just that. There are different types of shooters. So Beatrice is just your run-of-the-mill, like basic shooter who just her active increases the critical rate and critical damage by 60%. But there are other kinds. So for example, you can have Iru, and Iru has his active is increases attack power and critical damage by 20%, and it accumulates up to 5 times. And through this you can think like, well, the buff is a little bit different, but it's not as high as the other one, but actually it accumulates. So when you think about it, you can multiply all of these stats by 5, and that would be 125 attack power, 125% attack power, as well as 100% critical damage. But that is saying like if you do accumulate it up to 5 times, which means that you have to get the shot off at least 5 times, and the shooter would also have to use it again and again and again. In the current meta, it is not really that strong to use utility strikers such as Iru, but I have been defeated by quite a few of my friends that use them, such as 11 with his Van, and as well as Wanston with Latios. So it's definitely like doable, but maybe not the most viable in the current meta. So next we're going to be talking about the midline, and the midline's goal is to either catch the ball from the enemy who's trying to get to their front line, or break the ball into the front line. So either bring the ball here or keep it from going here. Simple. And how do you do that? Well, you want to have players like, you want to have an attacker or penetrator. So a really good attacker is Corel, and I know a lot of you may not have Corel because he's a legendary. I got him at the level 30 achievement for all of you that don't know, at rank 30 you do get a free legendary if I'm not wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but this is the one that I got, and he's really strong, so you can check that if they're an attacker or not by looking over here at the symbol. Attackers normally are really good at holding onto the ball and penetrating through, so just make sure that they have enough counterattack resistance as well as reflex to break through, but a lot of them have it built into their skill set, and also you can make sure that they have enough through their skills and spirit stones. So next we're going to be talking about the other players that you want in your midline, and that would include probably a defender or other buffers such as Lin Mei, who can also do a forward pass to the front line. So remember, the goal is to get the ball back to the front line. You can do it in many ways, but definitely like a tanky defender like Xing would be really good. He can take lots of hits, so he won't let the ball get through. It is important that some of your players in the midline have high reflex so that they can also counterattack and steal from the enemy midliners or the enemy backline players who are trying to get to the front line. Next, you also want to have possibly a buffer in your midline. So a really strong buff would be like Jade. Jade has a really strong buff called Soul Control, and this increases the attack power by 40% and reflex by 35% of the allies within the position. So think about it. Attack power and reflex is really good because you want to break through with attack power and you want to counterattack with reflex. So now for the backline. The backline really, like the main goal of the backline is to make sure, one, the goalkeeper stays alive, and two, that the ball can get back into the front line. So how do you do this? You have to first take a look at your goalkeeper. What kind of goalkeeper is your goalkeeper? Is it a critical resistance goalkeeper, or is it a critical damage resistance, penetration resistance, decrease inflicted damage kind of goalkeeper? You can take a look at that by looking at the skills, as well as maybe looking up at forums or Reddit, or just asking me in general. Ask me in the comments if you have any questions. I can help you out, and a lot of the commenters on my videos are really like much higher level than I am, and they can really help you out even more than I can. But please comment. So for example, Ire has a block active, and block increases penetration resistance when activated, and these block actives are actually activated when the enemies shoot at you. So you can see it takes half a bar of spirit and decreases damage coming from shoots as well as penetration resistance. So make sure that you take a look at your own goalkeeper's block or shield active or whatever, or power up active, and take a look at what they actually do and see what kind of goalkeeper they are. And you can also take a look at the passives, which are even more important actually. So in terms of Ire's passives, you have increasing the max HP and critical resistance, as well as defense and decreasing the incoming damage, and critical resistance and recovering HP. So as you can see, a lot of her skill set has to do with critical resistance. So because of that, I just thought, well, since Ire is a critical resistance goalkeeper, I want to build a backline that can even further buff that critical resistance. So how does that work? Well, another thing to take into account is actually chains. So this can really help you out when thinking about like, oh, what kind of like players should I put in my team? Well, take a look at the chains. Mainly the chains of your shooter as well as your goalkeeper. So the goalkeeper's affection chain is very important. So try and see if you can actually fulfill it. So in terms of Ire's affection chain, she has one for Vermilion, Bird, and Saramir. And in my initial formation video, I did not have a built Saramir. So since then, I've actually built up a Saramir. I've gotten her up to +5 SPU and put some good stones on her. And so I'm just going to put her into my backline. And so you're thinking like, okay, well, she gives her affection chain, so she increases the max HP of my goalkeeper. But what else does she actually give? Like, why would I put her into the backline? Well, actually, I wouldn't have put this player into my backline if she didn't provide anything other than affection chain for my goalkeeper. So, but she actually does provide a lot of other stuff. So in terms of your backline, you want to have either a buffer for your goalkeeper to survive, a stealer so that they can get the ball out of the backline, or a debuffer that can lower the attack or critical rate or critical damage or penetration of the enemy frontline. So Saramir does just that, and she does it very well. So in terms of debuffs, she has Overwhelming 2 that can decrease the critical rate and reflex of the enemy frontline, as well as Pure Barrier of Apocalypse that can decrease the action speed and pass effect by 30% of the enemies within the position. So that's really, really good because we can slow down the enemies as well as decrease the pass effect so that their passers, when they pass to the striker, they actually don't get as much damage. And Overwhelming 2 is the main reason because we get some extra critical rate decrease on the enemy frontline, which means that we get an extra critical rate increase on ours. If you think about it, it's the same thing. So next, what else do I want to have in my backline? Well, actually, I was thinking that Grandeur is a really good one because Grandeur has a really strong ace. So in terms of the ace thing, you have to take a look at this when thinking about what kind of team you want to make. So in terms of my team, I want to have a really, really tanky backline. And a really good way to do this is to look at different players' ace effects. So Grandeur's ace effect, if you look at it normally, is increasing the attack power and critical resistance of Whirlwind players by 35%. But when you want to make a mono team, a lot of players have Ace Burst, and Ace Burst will increase the Ace skill effect even more. So it increases the attack power and critical resistance by 56%. So that is really, really high. So think about that. We got 56% plus the 30% debuff from Saramir. We're already at plus 86%. Then Grandeur has Bond of the Forest too. So that's another 20%, plus 86% is 106%. Then if we look at the Spirit Stones on Saramir, I know a lot of you may not have this Spirit Stone if you're still very early in the game and you don't have many unique stones, but Endlessly Burning Matter is a very strong Spirit Stone to have in a critical resistance backline, as well as in a critical resistance backline. So this decreases the critical rate of the enemies within the position by 12%. So think about it this way. So we already have 30 plus 12 plus 56 plus 20 plus Irie's own critical resistance, having her at 113% initially. Think about the Spirit Stones that you can put onto her. So for example, in terms of the unique stone on my Irie, I have Protection of Mother Earth. So there's a lot of things that are going on and you really have to think about it, and I can make more videos on it in the future. But basically, you want to accentuate your goalkeeper's values. And in terms of your goalkeeper, you have to make sure you look at their passives, look at their active, and see what they're really trying to do. You can also look at the character forum and look at the move to the suggested stone forum. And you can take a look at some other players and what they do with their things. I do this a lot as well. Or you can post a comment in the comment section below and we can all help you out. So the next player that you can think about, so you want to have someone that even though they get to like really low HP from all the shooters and the passers trying to steal and shoot against your backline, they will still steal from the opponent even though they have really low HP. And in order to get that AI, you have to have a defender. And in terms of my defender, I'm actually using Rudiel right now. Even though my Rudiel is not at full SPU, as you can see, Rudiel is still really, really strong as she has really strong skills. And the reason why I chose Rudiel as opposed to other stealers or defenders is because she has this passive called Sense of Crisis. And this steals the attack power by 20% and critical rate by 30% of the enemies within the position with a penetration or steal. So that's another 30% critical resistance added to my Irie, and that's the reason why I'm using Rudiel in my backline. Next, it is important to think about the support position on your team. So what kind of support do you want to put on your team? This will determine whether you have a 4-man front line, a 4-man mid line, or a 4-man back line. In the current meta, a lot of people like to use 4-man front lines, but I've actually been using 4-man backline for as long as I can remember, and I don't really see myself using a 4-man frontline anytime soon. I really like having a strong goalkeeper and a very tanky backline, and I think it helps to have a 4-man backline. I actually use Magnus, and Magnus is a beautiful, like amazing backline buff leader, and you can see this with his skills. Like, he can decrease the damage that the allies take from Ardor and Thunder players, as well as increasing the action speed, max HP, and decreasing the incoming damage even further. He also has a really good active that increases the attack power and defense by 25%. So he's just a very, very strong backline player that many teams actually use, even if they're not mono whirlwind. So let's recap. So I'm just going to put Beatrice back on my team, and I'm actually going to use Narizel here. So this is basically my team setup, and I would have the ace on Grandeur. If I wanted to use a different setup, I could do the same thing, except I would take out Saramir and use Khalid for a slightly less HP and critical resistant backline, but a much faster one. As you can see, Khalid has a very strong ace burst that increases the action speed by 56% and pass effect by 72% of whirlwind players. So that's really strong because now my team can be very, very fast. And it is really important to take a look at different buffs that your players can give the rest of your line and think about how your players can best complement each other and promote each other's strengths. Let's recap. So the main thing that you want for your team is to have a very strong shooter that can do tons of damage, as well as a goalkeeper that can take lots of hits. Or at least take one very strong hit and have a backline that can bring it all the way to the front and get a clear shoot that can do lots of damage. In terms of aces, I've already showed you Ace Burst that can work with mono teams, so you can do that the same thing with like Mono Ardor. Let's say Erica is a very strong Ace Burst for mono Ardor. As you can see with the Ace Burst increasing the critical rate by 48% and critical damage by 56% of Ardor players, I see a lot of people using Erica in mono Ardor teams. But there are also other things. There's also dual Ace Burst, which is quite new, and a lot of people are actually using it. So for example, if we take a look at Lucian's Ace Burst, he can do increasing the attack power by 49% and max HP by 49% of Ardor and Whirlwind players. So that's for two different attributes, and this is really important for newer players who maybe enough players of the same attribute to make a mono team, or maybe you just really like two different attributes and you want to try putting them together. And I think that's really unique, and having the dual Ace Burst is a really good way for Soccer Spirits and B-Ball to let people be more creative with their teams. So yes. Definitely think about what kind of team that you want to make, and what players that you have that can complement each other the most. And of course, there are other aces that just buff the entire team in general, such as Yuri's that increases attack power and action speed by 20% of all players, no matter what attribute they are. I see a lot of that on rainbow teams. People could be using like Felix Ace, Jiho Ace. It's all very common. But if you don't have the legendaries and you don't want to do rainbow, that's totally okay. Like I'm using Mono Whirlwind. I'm in Diamond League. I'm very happy with that, and I want to keep on climbing, and I think that my team can help me do that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope it's helpful. Please subscribe and leave a comment below and leave a like. So thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for my next video. 朝起きて顔洗って楽しい毎日